A Jew from Germany once came to visit in Israel, and when he was visiting, he went into a restaurant and he asked them, "Do you take a credit card?" And the reason why he asked that question is because in Germany, not all restaurants take credit cards. So what was the answer? A classic Jewish answer: it depends. He said, "What does it depend on?" They said, simple. If the swipe goes through, we take it. If it doesn't go through, we don't. What's very interesting about Judaism is that things are not black and white. Ironically, many people think that religious people are always black and white. Everything they see is black and white. But actually, Judaism is filled with nuances. And even when you study Jewish law, you discover, as you study Jewish law, that there is a spectrum. And there are many factors that go into a decision, and therefore it's never simple black and white. And that's the reason why when a rabbi is confronted with a halakhic question, he needs to understand all of the circumstances and details, and he also needs to understand the person who is asking the question, because we don't only answer the circumstances, we also answer the person, because that is factored in, and depending on the flexibility and nuances involved in that particular law will depend on the flexibility that there is in that law. And one has to study a lot of Jewish law to appreciate this, and a lot of Torah in order to appreciate this. And this is a point that we want to bring out. You know, one of the 7 Noahide laws, which applies to every single human being, God commanded 7 laws to all human beings, and then to the Jewish people there are 613. One of the 7 Noahide laws is Tsar Balei Chaim, that one is forbidden from inflicting pain on an animal. It's absolutely prohibited. And that's the reason why we don't hunt for sport, because that's inflicting pain on an animal for our own enjoyment and benefit. That's absolutely wrong to do. However, at the same time, we know that we eat animals. So you're saying, 1 second, you don't inflict pain on animals, you're going to eat them? And the answer is yes. That's exactly so. The purpose of animals, of the creation of animals, there's a hierarchy in levels of life as God created the world. He created the world with inanimate objects, such as a stone, and then there's vegetation, which has some life to it, and then there are animals which have much higher life, and then there are the humans. And each level was designed to serve the higher level. That's how it gets upgraded, raised up spiritually. And therefore, when a human being gets nourished by meat, by eating an animal, they are raising up the animal. However, when someone is just inflicting pain for their own enjoyment, or sadistic enjoyment in some cases, that is absolutely forbidden, because that's not lifting up the animal, and therefore it would be forbidden. And that's the same reason why we use different animal body parts in order to preserve the life of a human being, such as valves from a pig to replace the valve of a human being. And likewise, we know whether we can even experiment on animals to advance medicine, therefore advancing the life of human beings. All of these are expressions of. And so again, it's not black and white, like either you can use animals or you can't use animals. It depends how you're using it. So there needs to be some understanding, and we can't just be black and white. And unfortunately, very often in society, we live in extremes, where it's, we go to one extreme or to another extreme without understanding and appreciating the nuances where really all of the richness is. A classic example going on in the United States is the major debate that's been going on for many, many years and remains a very hot issue until today, and that is abortion. Right? You have the extreme religious who just say abortion is absolutely forbidden, absolutely forbidden. And then you have the other side, which says a woman has the right to make these decisions. It's her life, and she gets to make these decisions on her own. And those both are somewhat extreme. And then there is the Jewish perspective. And the Jewish perspective is that, generally speaking, abortion is not something that should be performed. It's forbidden from being performed. However, there are certain circumstances and instances where abortion is permitted and sometimes even required. And we have to understand the nuances to know that, so we can't just fly to extremes when we deal with any single type of a matter. There is a chapter in the book of Tehillim, in the book of Psalms, chapter 79, which says something very interesting. And I'm sharing all of this entire introduction to understand how we look at the period of time we're in every single year when we read the Torah portion of Devarim, which is always the first Torah portion of the book of Deuteronomy, and it is the portion that we always read right before we observe the fast day of Tisha B'Av. We are mourning the destruction of both of our temples, which occurred on the exact same day. And so we know that this is a day that carries very strong negative energy. And the understanding of the day that the temple was destroyed requires nuance. It's not just black and white. And we see this expressed in this chapter of Tehillim of Psalms, from King David, which is chapter 79. Chapter 79 begins by saying, Mizmor la'asaf, a song to Asaph. Elokim, God, Bo Goyim Benachalasecha, the nations came into your inheritance. Timu es hechal kachecha, they made impure your holy sanctuary. Samu es Yerushalayim li'im, they placed the holy city of Jerusalem into heaps. In other words, they destroyed the city of Jerusalem. That's what this psalm says. What's this psalm talking about? It's talking about the enormous tragedy of the destruction of God's temple, God's home, and also the defiling and destruction of the defiling of the temple and the destruction of the city of Jerusalem being turned into heaps. Which begs a question which the Midrash asks, well then, if this is all about mourning the destruction of the temple, why does this psalm begin with Mizmar, a song la'asaf? It's a song? You sing a song on the destruction of the temple? We need some nuance here. There's a reason why we actually sing while we talk about the destruction. Because the destruction wasn't simply a destruction. You see, the Midrash tells us that a part of the fact that God destroyed the temple is something that we are very happy about. Why would we be happy about it? Because we say, God, thank you for taking out your quote-unquote anger on wood and stones instead of taking it out and destroying us, the Jewish people. That's what we are thanking God for, that God didn't destroy the Jewish people, but here we are still 2,000 years later to speak of it and to still live with the great hope that before Tisha B'Av begins this year, we will already be back in our third temple. And that's why it begins with Mizmar, to remind us that embedded in the destruction, there is some blessing, there is a silver lining, there is something positive here, and we must not lose sight of it. And that's the reason why we find something fascinating. What do we find fascinating about the Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is actually referred to in the Book of Lamentations as a moed, as a holiday. And the reason why it's referred to as a holiday is because embedded in the day of Tisha B'Av is also an element of rejoicing. In part, that's because we know that the destroying of the first and second temple, which were not permanent temples, as we can see from the fact that they were destroyed, but also as our prophets tell us, that the permanent, eternal temple will be the third temple. So we know that even though it was a very horrific experience, at the same time, it was a stepping stone that's bringing us closer to the eternal Beis HaMikdash, and that is the third temple that God's going to rebuild for us. And that's the reason why we have to remind ourselves that while we are mourning on Tisha B'Av, it is also in the mourning is a reminder that we are God's eternal people and God will never destroy us because we have an eternal covenant with God, and that we are ever closer to experiencing this eternity in a revealed state. And that's going to happen once we have our third temple, which will in fact be an eternal temple, which we will experience in a context of everyone, all of humanity and all of the entire universe being aware of the presence of God and living in the truth of God, and therefore the world being an eternal place.